At Ridgewood High, where appearances mattered more than kindness, silence often spoke louder than words. And in that silence lived a boy named Eli Navarro, the quiet student everyone noticed, yet no one really saw. Eli had been born profoundly deaf. His world was one of vibration and light, of movement and expression. But to others, it was a world they couldn't understand. His parents, immigrants who worked tirelessly to give him a better life, taught him to face the world with quiet strength. They reminded him that silence didn't mean weakness. But the world, especially high school, didn't agree. From his first day at Ridgewood, Eli was labeled. Not for his intelligence, not for his kindness, but for his difference. The way he moved his hands when he signed. The way he tilted his head to read lips. The way he didn't respond fast enough when called upon. Students would laugh behind his back, some mocking his voice when he tried to speak, others mimicking the gestures of his sign language like it was a joke. Even the teachers, though not cruel, often treated him with pity, as if his silence made him fragile. Group projects were worse. No one wanted to partner with him, and when he worked alone, his efforts were dismissed as incomplete communication. What they didn't see, what Eli's silence hid, was brilliance. Numbers spoke to him in ways words could not. He saw patterns in chaos, rhythm in equations, poetry in geometry. He had a mind built for precision, for creation, for innovation. He dreamed of becoming an engineer, designing tools and technology that would make life easier for others like him. Every day, Eli sat in the back of the class, watching the world through the glass of isolation. He wasn't angry, not yet. He had learned early that anger rarely changed minds, it only fueled ignorance. But deep inside, he carried something stronger, resolve. One afternoon, a moment crystallized everything. The class had been asked to present their science fair projects. Eli had built something incredible. A prototype of a real-time speech-to-sign glove, a device that could translate spoken words into written text and basic gestures. He had worked on it for months, alone in his garage, using scraps and old wiring his father brought from construction sites. When it was his turn, he stepped to the front, carrying the small device with trembling hands. He couldn't speak his explanation like the others, so he had prepared slides, visual, clean, easy to follow. The teacher nodded approvingly, but before he could begin, a snicker broke the room. A boy from the front, Marcus the self-proclaimed class clown, whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Can he even present if he can't talk?" Laughter rippled across the room. Even the teacher didn't intervene fast enough. Eli froze for a moment, his face tightening. He steadied his breathing. Then he switched on his project. The glove glowed faintly. He moved his fingers carefully, and on the projector screen, words appeared. "This is my voice." The room fell silent. But before the awe could settle, Marcus muttered again, "Creepy robot stuff." A few laughed under their breath. Eli finished his demonstration, his eyes never meeting theirs. When he sat down, he felt something break inside him, not his spirit, but his faith in fairness. His project, though extraordinary, received no recognition. The first prize went to Marcus, whose experiment was a simple vinegar volcano. That night, Ellie's mother found him working again, soldering wires with determined eyes. He wasn't just building anymore, he was planning. He would no longer seek validation from those who mocked him. He would build something that made them listen, not with their ears, but with their hearts. Weeks passed. The bullying grew quieter but crueler. Notes left on his desk with cruel drawings. Snickers when he passed in the hallway. He didn't react, but his silence carried a weight they couldn't see. And yet, through it all, he worked. He learned coding, circuitry, AI modeling, anything he could access online. His project evolved, transforming from a simple translation glove into something more powerful, an adaptive communication system. One that could detect emotion and tone, translating not just words, but intent. It became more than a school project. It became a revolution. But as graduation approached, so did the final science showcase, a citywide event where students would present to real engineers and investors. It was Eli's last chance to prove himself, to show that silence could speak louder than cruelty. Only one thing stood in his way. Marcus had also entered the competition. And this time, he had allies. In the weeks before the event, Marcus and his friends began spreading rumors that Eli had cheated, that he didn't even build his own device, that his parents paid someone online to make it for him. Some teachers began to question his work. He was asked to bring proof of every stage of his creation, every line of code, Every wire, every test result. Eli did it, calmly and precisely, without complaint. But deep down it hurt. No matter what he did, his silence seemed to make him guilty in their eyes. On the morning of the showcase, he walked into the auditorium with his prototype in hand. The culmination of years of silence, suffering, and strength. The room was filled with laughter, chatter, excitement. No one noticed him at first. No one but Marcus, who smirked from across the hall. Eli set his project on the table. His heart raced. For the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid to be seen. Because this time, he wasn't presenting for them. He was presenting for himself. As the judges began their rounds, Marcus leaned against his table, whispering something Eli couldn't hear, but he could read his lips. No one cares about the deaf kid. Eli looked at him, calm as the sea before a storm. And then, as the judges approached, his device powered on, its small lights glowing softly. Something was about to happen that would change everything. The air inside the Ridgewood auditorium pulsed with the excitement of ambition. Rows of tables were lined with colorful projects, gleaming robots, chemical experiments, model bridges, each one representing hours of effort and dreams of recognition. Parents, teachers, and judges moved through the aisles, clipboards in hand, their polite smiles masking silent judgments. Eli stood at the very end of the hall, in the corner where the fluorescent lights flickered slightly. His display was simple compared to the others. No flashy colors, no posters shouting for attention. Just a sleek, dark device connected to a small monitor and a quiet sign. Project EMIF, Emotional Motion Interpreter. He had chosen the name carefully. It wasn't just about translating speech into words or signs. It was about feeling. The system analyzed tone, facial expression, and rhythm, allowing the deaf to understand not just what was being said, but how it was meant. He watched as judges drifted from one project to another, stopping longer at tables surrounded by students who spoke fast and smiled wide. Each conversation felt like a performance. When they reached Marcus's table, the room seemed to light up. Marcus knew how to charm. He talked loudly, laughed even louder, and made sure everyone noticed him. His project, a drone program to follow hand gestures, wasn't groundbreaking, but it looked impressive enough to turn heads. Across the room, Eli waited. He adjusted the cables, double-checked the software, his hands steady though his chest tightened with each passing minute. He knew this was his moment. But he also knew that no matter how perfect his creation was, some people would still only see the deaf kid with a gadget. When the judges finally reached his station, Eli straightened. One of them, a middle-aged man in a tailored suit, gave a quick glance at the sign and raised an eyebrow. Another, a woman with glasses, smiled politely but skeptically. They didn't speak right away, instead looking around for a translator. None was needed. Eli turned on his device. The screen flickered, then words began appearing as the judges spoke. The system converted their questions into text in real time. The first judge leaned closer, intrigued. "So it captures speech?" he asked. The words appeared instantly, "So it captures speech." Eli nodded, then used his phone to type a response that connected to the monitor. His typed words appeared on screen. "It captures speech, tone, and facial emotion. It allows the deaf to perceive emotion in conversation, empathy, sarcasm, joy, anger, things often missed by sound alone." The judges exchanged glances. Their skepticism began to fade. The woman leaned in, testing the system further, speaking softer, faster, and even sarcastically. Each time Eli's system responded correctly, labeling the tone, detecting emotion. A small crowd began to gather. Students who had ignored him all year now craned their necks to see what the quiet boy had made. Even Marcus, a few tables away, frowned as the attention shifted. Then came the moment that would silence the room. One judge whispered something deliberately, low, emotional, almost inaudible amid the noise. Eli's device processed the tone and displayed the output: sad, empathetic, concerned. The words pulsed on the screen in soft blue. The woman smiled, astonished. "This could change everything," she murmured, and though Eli couldn't hear it, he saw the admiration in her eyes. For the first time in years, he felt seen, but as the judges moved to deliberate, Marcus acted. He approached Eli's table casually, pretending to admire the project while subtly reaching into his pocket. A moment later, Eli's device flickered. The screen glitched, then froze. His heart sank. He frantically checked the wiring, the connections. Everything looked fine, but the power was gone. Marcus smirked as he walked away, leaving behind the faint scent of burnt circuitry. Eli's mind raced. He knew what had happened. A short circuit, likely caused by a small metallic object. Something slipped into the port, maybe a coin fragment or wire shaving. It was sabotage. But there was no time. The final presentations were beginning, and his project, the one that had just stunned the judges, now sat lifeless. He tried to restart it, to breathe life back into the machine that represented his voice. Nothing. Marcus took the stage confidently. His drone soared through the air, performing neat loops and maneuvers. The audience clapped, impressed. Eli stood silently in the corner, holding the dead device, his reflection trembling in the monitor's black screen. He could walk away. No one would blame him. But deep down, he knew silence wasn't surrender. As the applause for Marcus faded, a sudden spark came from his project table. Eli blinked. The glove's sensors, still faintly connected to his phone, had auto reset through a secondary circuit he'd installed months ago. His backup system had activated. It wasn't perfect, but it was alive. Without hesitation, he approached one of the judges who had seemed most curious earlier and tapped lightly on the table to get her attention. He typed something quickly into the screen. "Please allow me one more minute. The system has rebooted." The woman hesitated, then nodded. Eli slipped on the glove again. The small LEDs blinked back to life. He raised his hand, signing a series of gestures while the system translated them to text. "I don't need sound to make a difference. I just need someone to listen." The audience gasped softly. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence that once made him invisible now made him unforgettable. As the judges moved to announce the finalists, Marcus looked uneasy. His project, while impressive, felt shallow next to what Eli had shown. The whispers began spreading. About Eli's invention, about what it could mean for millions of deaf individuals, about how he had built it from scratch. When the names were called for the final three, Marcus's confidence wavered. And then it happened. The host announced the top finalist, Eli Navarro. For Project EMI, cheers erupted, some out of genuine awe, others out of sheer surprise. Eli stood motionless for a second, then bowed slightly. He had done it. Against mockery, sabotage, and disbelief, he had made them see him. But as the applause died down, a security guard walked toward the stage. He held something small in his hand, a metallic fragment pulled from Eli's table. The guard spoke quietly to the judges. Their expressions darkened. The head judge turned to the crowd and asked if anyone had been near Eli's project before it malfunctioned. All eyes turned toward Marcus, who had suddenly gone pale. The whispers turned sharp, judgmental. Eli stood still, watching the panic spread across Marcus's face. For once, the bully couldn't talk his way out. The truth, it seemed, was finally catching up. The energy inside the auditorium shifted from excitement to tension within seconds. The metallic fragment in the guard's hand glinted under the fluorescent lights like a piece of evidence from a crime scene. The judges gathered in a small circle, murmuring in low tones, their eyes darting between Eli's table and Marcus's. Marcus stood frozen, trying to maintain his calm. His earlier grin had disappeared, replaced by a forced expression of confusion. He raised his hands as if to deny what everyone was thinking, but the murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Eli remained still. He didn't move toward Marcus or the judges. He didn't sign, didn't type, didn't try to explain himself. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than any words could be. For once, he wasn't the one being questioned. And that silence made Marcus squirm. The lead judge stepped forward and addressed the crowd. He explained that during the evaluation, a small piece of metal had been found lodged inside Eli's project's input port, likely causing the short circuit. The object didn't belong to any of the device's components. It had been inserted. When asked if anyone had been near the table, several students hesitated. Then one of them, a quiet girl from the robotics club, raised her hand. She admitted seeing Marcus leaning over Eli's table shortly before the malfunction, pretending to check out his work. The crowd turned on him immediately. The whispers became accusations. The teachers exchanged knowing looks. Marcus's confident demeanor cracked completely. He stammered, shook his head, denied it all. But the damage was done. The judges announced a temporary halt to the competition while the matter was investigated. The noise in the room grew restless. Students began gathering their projects. Parents whispered about the scandal. Through it all, Eli remained calm. His expression didn't show anger, only quiet disappointment. For years, he had been mocked, underestimated, and ridiculed. But in this moment, the truth was speaking for him, not through technology, not through gestures, but through justice itself. Marcus's father, a man with connections and influence, rushed forward to speak privately with the judges. He insisted it was a misunderstanding. He argued that his son had been framed, that perhaps Eli's device was unstable and malfunctioned on its own. But the proof was undeniable. The fragment matched a component Marcus had used in his own project. The irony hung thick in the air. By the end of the day, the decision was made. Marcus was disqualified for tampering with another participant's project. His award was revoked, and his project was removed from the stage. The announcement rippled through the crowd like a wave. Some students cheered quietly, others looked on in shock. Eli didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. Instead, he walked to his project, touched the glove gently, and powered it down. His victory wasn't in Marcus's downfall. It was in knowing that truth had found its way through the noise. Later that evening, as the auditorium emptied, one of the judges approached him privately. She told him, through written words, that his invention was one of the most promising things she had ever seen. She wanted him to present it at a national innovation fair in the coming months, with full sponsorship and mentorship. Eli stared at her words for a long moment, his heart pounding. For so long he had been told he didn't belong. Now someone believed in him. He nodded gratefully, his eyes glistening. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky with hues of gold and crimson. Eli walked home quietly, his prototype secured in his backpack, unaware that this moment, this one act of justice, would ignite a series of events that would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone who had ever doubted him. In the weeks that followed, news of the showcase scandal spread through Ridgewood like wildfire. The local paper ran a headline, "Student with Hearing Impairment Wins Fair After Sabotage Attempt." The article went viral online, sparking outrage and admiration alike. Eli became a symbol of perseverance. Not that he sought fame, but his story resonated. Teachers began to treat him differently, some out of guilt, others out of respect. Classmates who once mocked him now tried to sit beside him in class, eager to be seen near. The genius kid. But not everyone was happy. Marcus and his father's anger festered. They blamed Eli for the humiliation, convinced he had orchestrated it. Marcus stopped coming to school for a while, and when he returned, he avoided eye contact. Yet, behind that silence, something darker brewed. Eli, however, focused on his dream. With help from the mentor who had believed in him, he refined his device, integrating better sensors, smoother design, and faster processing. He even designed a version that could convert written text back into voice for users who couldn't speak. Each improvement felt like reclaiming a piece of himself the world had tried to take. By spring, he received an invitation to the National Innovation Fair, an event attended by investors, engineers, and companies seeking the next breakthrough in technology. It was an opportunity of a lifetime, but with opportunity came attention. Suddenly, reporters wanted to interview him. Articles circulated with headlines like, "Deaf Teen Redefines Communication," and "From Silence to Innovation." He became an inspiration to people across the country. But with that came scrutiny and envy. The night before he was scheduled to travel to the national event, a message appeared on his social media account. It was anonymous but unmistakable in its tone. "You took everything from me. Enjoy the spotlight while it lasts." The next morning, Eli found his backpack ripped open in his locker. His prototype was gone. Panic surged through him. He searched every hallway, checked every classroom, and alerted the principal, but it was too late. The device, his voice, his hope, his future had vanished. That afternoon, the principal called him into the office. They had found security footage. Someone had broken into the lockers early that morning. The image was blurry, but the outline was familiar. Marcus. Eli stared at the screen, his heart sinking. The same person who had tried to silence him before was at it again. But this time it wasn't just sabotage, it was theft. And this time, Eli wasn't going to let it slide. The moment Eli saw Marcus's blurry silhouette on the security footage, something inside him hardened. He had faced mockery, sabotage, and prejudice before. But this was different. This was theft. His creation wasn't just a project. It was the culmination of years of struggle, silence, and resilience. Losing it felt like losing a part of himself. The school launched an investigation, but bureaucracy moved slowly. The principal promised to look into it, while teachers whispered about the ongoing situation. To most of them, it was just another case of teenage rivalry. But to Eli, it was everything. Without his prototype, he couldn't compete in the National Innovation Fair. Without it, his voice, his proof that he belonged, was gone. He spent the next 2 days retracing his steps. The janitor had seen nothing. The security cameras outside the school were broken, conveniently. His classmates offered pitying looks but no help. The system that had once ignored him seemed content to do so again. But Eli didn't stop. He started thinking the way he always did, logically, analytically. He remembered Marcus's history: impulsive, arrogant, but not careful. If Marcus had stolen the prototype, he wouldn't have known how to handle it. The device was delicate, coded to Eli's touch and encrypted with his user signature. If someone tampered with it, it would send a distress signal to his backup account. He checked his old laptop, and there it was, a location ping. The device had powered on briefly the previous night, somewhere near the old industrial district, on the outskirts of town. That was all he needed. After school, he took the bus to the industrial area. The sun hung low, painting long shadows over broken fences and abandoned warehouses. The place was silent except for the wind whispering through shattered windows. Eli's heart pounded as he followed the signal on his phone, watching the location marker pulse like a heartbeat. It led him to a rundown garage with graffiti on the walls and a rusted sign that read Riley's Auto Salvage. The door was slightly ajar. He stepped inside cautiously, the smell of oil and dust heavy in the air. There, under a flickering light, sat Marcus. He wasn't alone. 2 of his friends stood nearby, laughing as they tinkered with the remains of Eli's prototype on a metal table. The glove was cracked open, wires exposed, circuits damaged beyond repair. Marcus looked up and froze when he saw Eli standing in the doorway. For a moment, guilt flickered across his face, quickly replaced by defiance. He said something. Eli couldn't hear it, but he could read his lips. "You don't deserve this." Eli's chest tightened. He stepped closer, his eyes locked on the broken device. The years of humiliation, the laughter, the discrimination, all of it boiled beneath his calm expression. He didn't shout or fight. Instead, he reached for his phone and sent a signal to his cloud backup. The glove's internal chip, though destroyed, still contained the encrypted core of his program. With one command, he uploaded everything to his secure storage. Marcus didn't realize what was happening. He thought destroying the glove would end Eli's chances. But Eli had always prepared for the worst. His invention wasn't just a physical object. It was an idea, a vision, a voice that couldn't be silenced. When Marcus noticed the small light blinking on the device, his face turned pale. He lunged toward Eli, trying to snatch the phone, but Eli stepped back, his grip steady. The backup finished transmitting, and with it, Eli's future was saved. Marcus's friends pulled him away before things could escalate. They muttered nervously, realizing they had crossed a line far deeper than schoolyard rivalry. Eli turned and walked out without another glance. Outside, the air felt colder. His prototype was gone, but his code, his essence, was intact. He had lost the battle, but not the war. That night, he worked tirelessly, rewriting what was damaged, reprogramming from memory, improving everything that had once been fragile. His mentor, upon hearing what happened, arranged for a replacement set of components to be delivered. She refused to let him give up. For nights on end, he barely slept. The rhythmic tapping of keys filled his room, the glow of his screen illuminating his determined face. Piece by piece, he rebuilt his project, not out of revenge, but out of defiance, against every hand that had tried to silence him. By the time the National Innovation Fair arrived, his device was reborn, smaller, faster, smarter. He renamed it EMI. When he arrived at the event, the venue was unlike anything he had ever seen. Huge banners hung from the ceiling, cameras flashed, and hundreds of young inventors from across the country showcased their creations. Eli stood quietly at his booth, his new prototype glowing faintly on the table. His mentor stood nearby, proud. But as fate would have it, Marcus was there too. His father's influence had secured him a late entry under a different sponsor. When their eyes met, the tension was palpable. Marcus tried to smirk, but it faltered. Deep down, he knew the truth. He had lost before it even began. When the judges arrived at Eli's booth, they recognized him instantly. The story of the Ridgewood showcase had gone national. They listened, or rather, watched, as Eli demonstrated the improved version of his invention. It now not only translated tone and emotion, but also generated haptic feedback, allowing the user to feel emotional context through vibration patterns. The crowd was stunned. The device was revolutionary, bridging communication in ways no one had imagined. One of the judges, a senior executive from a tech firm, approached him afterward. She explained that their company specialized in accessibility technology and that they wanted to partner with him. They offered him funding, development support, and a position on their innovation team after graduation. Eli was speechless. Years of humiliation, silence, and pain had led to this, the world finally hearing him without sound. But amid the applause and admiration, Marcus watched from afar, his face pale with regret. For the first time, he saw what his cruelty had cost him, not just a competition, but his integrity, his future. As Eli accepted his award on stage, the lights bathed him in gold. Cameras flashed, capturing his quiet smile, a smile of vindication, not vengeance. But just as the applause reached its peak, Marcus disappeared into the crowd. And that night, something unexpected would happen. Something that would bring Eli's story full circle in a way no one saw coming. The night after the innovation fair felt surreal for Eli. His invention had not only won but had captured the attention of national media. The headline read, "Deaf Student's Voice Device Changes Communication Forever." His phone buzzed with messages, interview requests, and congratulations from people he didn't even know. But amid the whirlwind of celebration, Eli remained calm. He knew that triumph often brought attention, and not all of it would be good. His mother cried tears of joy when she saw him on television. She had spent years watching her son fight silently against a world that doubted him. Now, she finally saw him being heard, not through words, but through brilliance. For the first time in his life, Eli felt like his silence wasn't a limitation. It was his strength. Yet, while the world celebrated him, Marcus sat alone in his room, his face buried in his hands. The humiliation burned deeper than he expected. He had always believed that dominance came from status, looks, or charm. But Eli had destroyed that illusion with quiet resilience. The same boy he had mocked and bullied had outshined him completely. Marcus's father, furious about the scandal, had withdrawn his sponsorship and scolded him publicly. Rumors spread that Marcus had tried to sabotage a disabled student's project. His acceptance letter to an elite college was suddenly under review. His friends distanced themselves. Overnight, he became a social pariah. Rage and shame twisted inside him. He wanted to apologize, but pride wouldn't let him. Instead, that bitterness hardened into something darker, resentment. The following evening, the school organized a small celebration for Eli and other fair participants. It was a modest event at the auditorium, balloons, soft music, and glowing lights. Eli arrived with his mentor and his mother. The students clapped as he entered, their once judgmental eyes now filled with admiration. He was no longer the quiet kid in the corner. He was a symbol of courage. But outside, in the parking lot, Marcus sat in his car, watching from a distance. His hands clenched the steering wheel. He had drunk too much, and his thoughts blurred into anger and regret. He couldn't stand the sight of Eli being praised. He muttered to himself, blaming the world, blaming Eli, blaming anyone but himself. The bottle beside him clinked as he set it down, and then, impulsively, he started the engine. Inside the hall, Eli stood near the stage, showing the younger students how his device worked. His mentor beamed proudly beside him. The air was warm and full of laughter. For a brief moment, it felt like peace had finally arrived. Then, chaos. A loud crash shattered the night as headlights tore through the school's parking lot. Tires screeched. Metal collided with metal. Screams echoed. The room froze. Eli's mentor ran outside, and within moments, panic spread through the crowd. Eli followed, his heart pounding, struggling to understand what had happened. When he reached the entrance, his breath caught in his throat. Marcus's car had slammed into a pole near the edge of the lot, smoke rising from the crumpled hood. He was unconscious, blood trickling down his forehead. The scent of gasoline filled the air. The students stood back, terrified. No one dared to go near the car, afraid it might explode. But Eli didn't hesitate. Without thinking, he rushed forward. The world seemed to slow as he ran through the smoke and sparks. His mentor shouted for him to stop, but he didn't. His instincts overpowered his fear. He yanked the car door open and tried to pull Marcus out. The seatbelt was jammed. His hands trembled as he struggled to unclip it, coughing through the smoke. The car hissed, the engine sputtering. Every second felt like a lifetime. Finally, the buckle released. Eli dragged Marcus out of the wreckage, inch by inch, until they both collapsed on the pavement. A few seconds later, the car burst into flames, lighting up the night sky in a violent blaze. Paramedics arrived soon after, rushing Marcus to the hospital. Eli sat on the curb, suit on his face, the flickering lights of the ambulance reflecting in his wide, silent eyes. The crowd looked at him in stunned disbelief. The boy they had once ridiculed for being different had just saved the very person who hurt him most. His mentor knelt beside him, trembling with relief. She signed a single phrase, "You did good," but Eli didn't feel victorious. As the ambulance disappeared into the distance, a strange heaviness settled over him. That night, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling. His mind replayed the image of Marcus's pale face, the blood, the flames. He couldn't understand why he had risked everything to save him. Maybe because, deep down, he didn't want revenge. He wanted peace. In the days that followed, the news spread again. This time the headlines read, "Deaf Student Saves Former Bully's Life." The story went viral across the nation. People called Eli a hero. Marcus, meanwhile, recovered in the hospital. His injuries were severe but not life-threatening. The doctors said he owed his life to Eli's quick actions. For days, Marcus lay awake in silence, the same silence he had once mocked Eli for. With every breath, guilt clawed at him. He realized that his arrogance, his prejudice, his cruelty had led to his downfall. And the one person he had despised most had been the one to save him. When he was finally discharged, he asked to see Eli. And though Eli didn't know it yet, that meeting would change both of their lives forever. Weeks passed after the accident, and the school's once buzzing halls had changed. Students now greeted Eli with respect, teachers spoke of him with admiration, and his story had become a symbol of courage, empathy, and forgiveness. News anchors praised him, social media celebrated him, and people across the nation called him the boy who taught the world how to listen. Yet, despite all the attention, Eli remained grounded. He returned to school quietly, continued working on his projects, and spent his evenings with his mother. He didn't crave the fame that followed him. All he ever wanted was to be treated as equal, to be seen for his abilities, not his differences. But one morning, as he was walking through the school courtyard, the whispers began again, not cruel this time but curious. People turned their heads toward the front gates. Standing there, with visible scars and a humble look in his eyes, was Marcus. He had changed. The boy who once carried himself with arrogance now walked slowly, carefully, as though each step carried the weight of remorse. His father's influence was gone, his friends had left, and his reputation had crumbled. But what mattered most now wasn't what he had lost. It was what he had realized. The principal greeted him with hesitation. Marcus had asked for permission to speak at the school assembly, and reluctantly it was granted. Word spread quickly. By noon, the auditorium was full. Students, teachers, and even parents came to hear what the once popular bully had to say. Eli sat quietly near the back, his hands folded, watching. When Marcus stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. He looked different, not just physically, but emotionally. The fire of arrogance in his eyes had been replaced with something else: a shame, humility, and gratitude. He stood before the microphone, his voice trembling. He admitted his past, the bullying, the cruelty, the prejudice he had carried in his heart. He confessed that he used to think power came from belittling others, that superiority was something you could earn through wealth or status. But when he was lying in that burning car, trapped and terrified, it wasn't a rich man, a friend, or a teacher who saved him. It was the very person he had made feel small. His voice cracked as he described waking up in the hospital, realizing that the boy he had mocked for being different had shown more humanity in one act than he had in his entire life. The entire hall was silent. Some students visibly moved to tears. Marcus turned toward Eli, sitting among the crowd. Their eyes met. He slowly bowed his head, a gesture not of pity, but of deep respect. He signed one simple word that he had practiced for days: sorry. The audience erupted in applause. Some cried, others stood. But Eli didn't bask in the attention. Instead, he simply nodded, a quiet acceptance that spoke louder than any words could. That moment became one of the most powerful images to ever emerge from their small town. Someone captured it, Marcus on stage, scarred but sincere, and Eli in the crowd, calm and strong, and posted it online. Within hours it went viral. Headlines read, "From bully to believer, a deaf student and his former tormentor teach the world forgiveness." News outlets across the country picked it up. Schools began using their story in assemblies to talk about kindness, inclusion, and change. Eli was invited to speak at universities and tech conferences, sharing his journey and the invention that had started it all. Even though his voice device now allowed him to communicate verbally, He often preferred signing, a reminder of his roots and identity. Marcus, on the other hand, started volunteering at a rehabilitation center for children with disabilities. He spent his weekends there, reading stories, helping with events, and learning sign language so he could communicate directly with the kids. For the first time, he understood that leadership didn't mean standing above others. It meant standing beside them. As months turned into years, Eli's invention grew beyond anything he imagined. Major tech companies offered him funding. His creation, a device that translated sign language into real-time speech, was now being used in schools, hospitals, and workplaces across the world. It bridged gaps between communities and gave countless people a voice they never had before. Eli became a symbol of resilience, proof that one person's difference could become humanity's progress. And Marcus never stopped thanking him. Though they weren't close friends, they shared a quiet bond, a shared understanding that the greatest lesson either of them had ever learned came not from textbooks, but from compassion. Years later, at a global technology summit, Eli stood on stage, older, confident, and still carrying the same humble presence. Behind him was a massive screen showing the evolution of his invention. In the front row sat his mother, his mentor, and Marcus, who had traveled across the country just to be there. As the crowd applauded, Eli paused for a moment, looked into the lights, and thought back to the boy he once was. The one who sat alone at lunch, ignored, mocked, and underestimated. He realized something profound: the world may have tried to silence him, but in the end, his silence had spoken louder than anyone's words ever could. When the lights dimmed and the music swelled, the camera panned across the audience. Among the faces was Marcus, wiping his eyes. Not out of guilt anymore, but pride in the boy he once wronged, who had taught him and the world the meaning of grace. And as Eli raised his hand to wave to the crowd, signing a simple phrase, "Thank you for listening," the applause rose like thunder. For the first time, everyone understood that a voice isn't defined by sound. It's defined by courage.